This week, Mark's guests are 600 Supersport competitor Tom Toparis. And BSB race director Stuart Higgs tells us how they brought huge crowds back to the tracks. Join us for part 2 of the conversation with Jim Scaysbrook, and operations manager Dean Chapman reveals what's happening at Wakefield Park.
G'day and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Motorsport. I'm Mark Brax and we've got plenty of guests tonight as we get into episode number 20. 20 shows, hey? Who would have thought that? But onward and upward as we rock and roll. Now, this week, we've got 4 guests, as we said at the start of the show, and we'll start with Tom Toparis, 2019 Aussie Supersport champion. He's supposed to be overseas at the moment, competing in the World Supersport Championship with his Dutch team, but alas, he's stuck here, so he took the opportunity to catch up with him. G'day, Tommy, how are you, mate? Good to see you after all this time.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, thanks, mate. Good to see you too. Thanks for having me on.
Are you surprised about how fast you've come through the ranks?
Yeah, it's been interesting because I think this was meant to be my 5th year racing, so 5 years goes really quickly, and it doesn't feel like that long ago. I was out here at Wakefield for my first race with Cube Racing on the Ninja 300. Like, it is definitely a lot to cram in, and I don't know. Yeah, definitely, I'm lucky. I've just been really lucky with the rides that I've had. You know, like it's for most people, like you start off by yourself, you know, with your dad, and it's sort of hard to make that next step. So I've been lucky enough to have, I went straight into Cube Racing with Ben Henry and Troy Bayliss. Like, I was positioned from the beginning, and I was able to learn so much off those guys. And then that's probably got me to the position that I'm in now, heading overseas and race championship. So yeah, super grateful to be in the World Championship. Although I haven't actually raced there yet this year. Yeah, just still loving it. Like, that's the main thing. Still loving racing, and then yeah, it'll be interesting to see once everyone gets back to racing if I can, you know, sort of put it to the world guys and just try and sort of make that little step towards the front and try and make a career out of it. I think it's super important to sort of shine straight away, to sort of make an impact, and hopefully I can get something out of it, get some good exposure, and then hopefully eventually race in Europe, you know, for a living. That's the goal.
Would Troy Bayliss be the biggest influence on your career?
Yeah, for sure. Troy and Ben, like, I did those 3 years there. Although Troy was sort of more involved with Desmo Sport Ducati in the early days, until Ollie came along, and then I think we were a little team. Like, that's just how it is. We work together, and I definitely learned a lot off Troy and Benny, and then obviously Marty Dowd came along midway through that run at Cube Racing. So yeah, just those 3 guys together. There's so much experience crammed in there, and without even trying to learn, you learn so much off those guys. So yeah, it's like I said, so lucky, and obviously with Troy especially, being a 3-time world champion, it's like every time he speaks, you sort of listen to what he says because he knows what he's doing. So of course, Troy's definitely been a big impact on me since I started racing.
Your favourite bike, Kawasaki or Yamaha?
The Benro R6 from last year it's pretty hard to beat. Those guys over there do a really good job. And I was over there this year for the first couple of months, and although I didn't get to ride the bike, I was at the workshop every single day looking at it. So I see the effort that they put into that bike, and it's a bit of a machine. Like, I'm keen to see, even last year, the IDM rules, they were quite standard, similar to the ASBK 600s. And then I was lucky enough to get that BSB wildcard, and we had a 10 carter engine for that. So that was sort of a little bit of an eye opener to see sort of what the R6 can really do. And I had a great weekend that weekend. So this year we've got a great little package. Just unfortunate that I haven't been able to actually get on it yet. So yeah, the Benro R6 would be the go for sure.
Now, last year you did a pretty good effort over there, and here you probably got the frequent flyer miles up pretty well, didn't you?
Yeah, it was definitely tough to cram all of that in. Although I think it was good to be riding so much. Like, it's a bit of a contrast to the last couple of months when I haven't been riding at all. And I can definitely say that I'd rather be doing what I was doing last year, flying back and forth. And wasn't on the bike every weekend, but I was on the bike technically twice as much as anyone here in Australia. So, like a lot of riding, a lot of travelling as well, which you sort of get used to. And one day's travel to Europe and back doesn't seem like a lot now after the last trip I had, having to sit in the hotel for 2 weeks. Like, next time I go to Europe, it's going to feel like nothing really compared to what I experienced a couple of weeks ago. So, it's a lot to cram in, but it'll be great to go to Europe and just spend the time there and focus with the team, not have to jump bikes, just be on the same bike all the time, try and build on it and move forwards and see how we go.
Well, you'd probably be busting a nut to get over there, because if you stay here, you will be racing in the Aussie Supersport Championship, but there'll be some bloke by Ollie Bayliss using you as a speed bump.
Yeah, that's all right. It was interesting the first round. Like, I wasn't going to do it until last minute, and it was a bit of a last-minute.com effort, although I'm so glad I did it now. Although I didn't win, I'm really glad that I was able to have a race meeting under my belt this year. I think none of us expected to have a pandemic stop us from racing for a couple of months, So looking back on it now, I've done some racing this year, which I'm grateful for. And if I do by chance happen to race ASBK this year, I'm definitely keen to get back out there with the guys. My bike here is probably not where it needs to be. Do a little bit of work on it to get it to be a little bit more like what I've been riding. It's kind of a little bit still a little bit feels a bit funny compared to normal, and that's simply because I don't have anyone working with me. I'm like at the first round, even I was just mechanicking for myself, and I had my dad and my brothers there, but they're sort of definitely no Marty Dowd. So yeah, it's been tough this year. Not having a mechanic, you take it for granted. But I think if racing in ASBK, if I'm racing in ASBK, I'll get a little team together and maybe get some parts and stuff, and have a bit of a crack at another Aussie Supersport title.
Thanks for joining us, Tom, and say good day to your folks for us and everybody else down there in the pits, and hopefully we'll chat again to you soon, but hopefully when I chat to you next time, you're in Holland and I'm here.
Yeah, that's what we want. So hopefully, a couple of weeks and get back over there and get back to normal. So thanks for having me on, and I'll speak to you soon.
All right, mate, no worries, Tom. See you later.
Cheers. Thanks, Braxy.
Well, we wish Tom all the best, and hopefully he's overseas very shortly as everything gets back to normal. Now, our next guest, Stuart Higgs, the event director of the British Superbike Championship. He's got an interesting story to tell, and like any guy at the top, really knows what's going on. And they've really got that BSB Championship going places. As we've seen the last few years, it's going strength to strength. So let's have a chat with Stuart and get a few insights into what makes that championship so good. Stuart Higgs, welcome to Let's Talk Motorsport, and especially for gracing us this early in the morning your time. You'd have probably the most well patronised domestic championship in the world with the crowds you get there.
Yeah, no, our championship is built on its fan base. Obviously we'd have a great TV broadcast package, but there's no substitute for being at the event. The access, the closeness to the riders and teams, obviously some of that access is going to be compromised in a new situation, I'm sure, but just for a day or weekend's racing, lots and lots of on-track activity, it's what the reputation is built on. So we're going to need the fans back, certainly.
Do you have camping at most of your tracks?
Yeah, absolutely. All of them. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest single things that the championship has improved and enhanced over certainly the last 10 to 12 years, where we've seen a really big change from a one-day walk-up audience to a big weekend attendance. I mean, ironically, it was after the last big downturn in, say, 2008, 2009, the global credit crisis, when a lot of people, tightened their belts, decided they probably didn't want to go and do a European vacation with the family, and found that actually spending nice weekends away in the RV or camping in these nice parkland circuits that we have all over the UK was a great value for money and a great social experience. And there was actually a big increase, and that increase has gained momentum, and it underpins really the character of the events. A lot of the events take place on some of the best weekends over the summer in terms of bank holiday weekends. The venues just lend themselves to where they are geographically located, to be in nice parts of the countryside, and there just happens to be a race going on in front of your RV, which is perfect.
Now let's go back a bit in time too. When you alluded to that time back at the end of the noughties, the BSB at one stage wasn't in the best shape. What do you put it down to? Like obviously a lot of hard work, but to turn it around, and we know that the British folk love motorsport. It's part of the history of motorsport, whether it's cars and bikes, since the turn of the 20th century. What was the catalyst and everything to get it back to where it is now, when it's it looks like every round is packed out with spectators?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely right, Mark. I mean, what we have today is the product of a lot of hard work. I mean, certainly in the mid-90s, British motorcycle racing was in a right old pickle. Every single year, the format changed. It was that the promoter was also the national governing body, which was an organisation just absolutely stooped in politics. Fred would be voted on one year, and so he'd have his idea for the championship and call it something. Then Colin hated him, so he'd be then spending all year trying to underpin what he'd done, and then the next year be something else. And in one particular year, you probably had about 4 or 5 different championships for the same bikes, and no one really could distinctly call themselves the British champion because no one knew. And if the people within the sport didn't know what was going on, then it was absolutely hopeless, to the point of impossible that anyone outside the sport would ever have a fighting chance of remotely understanding. The group of people that were also adversely affected by this were the circuit owners. They owned the real estate, saying, look, no one is coming to watch these things because the product isn't very good and it's unlikely to get better. It's just rank amateurism. And at the same time, the British Touring Car Championship was a box office phenomenon. It had great manufacturer interest, great TV coverage at the time. Satellite TV was barely heard of, but so it was terrestrial coverage on the BBC. Just a 30 minutes highlights program, getting about 5 million viewers. But that 5 million viewers translated to mass manufacturing involvement. So the pioneer in the end was a guy called Robert Furnell, who was the managing director of the company that promoted all the races at Donington Park. Great industry stalwart. I mean, sadly passed away now. And he had the balls to basically get all the circuits together and do a bit of a fait accompli to the ACU, who were the national governing body, and say, we're simply going to create our own governing body. And you've got a choice. You can either come with us and have a seat at the table. It won't be a very loud voice you've got, but you'll be on the table, or we're just going to do it anyway. Fortunately, the ACU said, okay, well, we'd like to be involved because we know we're going to get run out of town. But that allowed professionalism to start, a proper TV contract. So for the start of 96, we had the same deal as touring cars, just a 30-minute highlights program on a TV program called Grandstand, which was the BBC's flagship sports program, which, as I say, back in those days, was getting about 5 million viewers a weekend, 12 races. So immediately we went to like a 60 million audience, which unlocked manufacturer money, unlocked sponsor money. and we were on our way. There were a central organisation. I mean, prior to then, if it was a race at Brands Hatch, the Brands Hatch sort of racing club, parochial to that, they would run that race. If we were at Alton Park in Cheshire, they would run it. I mean, no one could agree on anyone. I mean, the UK is obviously such a geographical, it's a postage stamp compared to Australia. Yeah, people literally 50 miles away from each other would run an event completely different. I mean, it was just a shambles. So getting all that done and getting everything nationally organised, a national mindset, that was the starting point. And we had great years, 96 through to 99. But then, things, a bit of greed comes in. There was an American circuit owning group that looked after Brands Hatch and the various other circuits, and they were hoovering up all the rights. They thought they could do a better job when, together with everything else, they bankrupted themselves. So the thing fell on its arse at the end of 2003. We then had actually Dorna come in for 3 years to be the commercial rights holder, or the UK subsidiary of Dorna. And that was a good step. They certainly helped us with TV and commercial development. But there was quite big conflicts on the ground between those guys and the circuit owners, and the most dominant circuit owner was a guy who appeared on the scene in 2004, a guy called Jonathan Palmer. He's a former Formula One Grand Prix racing driver, very entrepreneurial, and he'd acquired most of the circuits in the UK in 2004, and by the time we got to the end of 2007, he really understood that he could further everything by getting together with me to promote the championship. So we joined together the commercial and organisational strength of BSB with the major circuit owning activity, and really that was the springboard, because all the cards were on the side of the people that could actually do the most with it. And we've just forged ahead, making long-term commercial deals, long-term TV deals. Everyone can take a decision, even in these challenge times, now, knowing that, for example, we announced this week we've got a 7-year TV deal with Discovery and Eurosport. So everything prior to 2008 had been probably on a 1 or 2 year kind of maximum time frame, and you just can't invest and make decisions that involve spending significant sums of money if you think the whole thing could be gone in a couple of years.
7 years, that's a remarkable contract to sign, especially in this day and age as well, when people's attention spans are, a little, pardon me, leave a bit to be desired. That 7 years is awesome. Congratulations.
No, thanks, Mark. I mean, there's been a few sleepless nights anyway because of the CV pandemic, but this was something that was on the table, and everything that we've worked for the championship, this was quite crucial, this point, on where we went, direction of travel with which broadcast group, and there were some options on the table, but no, we're very satisfied, and it's just nice to have a week where we've gone from literally probably within 3 or 4 weeks ago, not knowing if we can run at all this year, and then by a virtue of not running this year, everything would be extremely vulnerable on the commercial and all aspects of the sport and the industry. And then this week we've not just confirmed that we've got every intention of racing this year, but we can add some significant long-term commitment with the broadcast deal.
Now, getting on with owning all the tracks, and it's not only motorcycle racing because you've got so many different categories of car racing over there. Has that been a logistic nightmare in the last couple of months by trying to keep people not happy, but just letting them know what's going on? Because as we all know now, we've got to try and cram 52 weekends into 26 weekends in motorsport.
No, I mean, I think it's been an advantage for us by, obviously we own and operate Brands Hatch, Snetterton, Donington, Cadwell, and Alton Park. So we've got a good holistic view of all the dates, and I think it drills down. There is a pyramid structure in the UK in terms of the British Superbike Championship and the British Touring Car Championship, with the very strong domestic championships, 2 and 4 wheels. That kind of sets the tone of where things will fall. So we sketched our calendar out, our wish list quite early. We'd always kind of figured August would be about right for a restart. some club race competition. Car and bike is coming back in July. So, yeah, for sure, there's been some things that have had to be parked, some events that would have been high attended spectator events. There's a lot of these, particularly in car racing, all these kind of one manufacturer festivals, be it Porsche Festival, Ferrari Festival, these types of events. So they've all been parked, and some of the historic stuff early on. But no, the calendar is looking in remarkably healthy shape. I mean, on the track day front, bike track days, I mean, they started in the UK on the 26th of March, and the track day operators reporting literally volumes of 2 months in 2 weeks in terms of eagerness to get back out there. So I'm sure there's a little bit of a lag in people's spend, and obviously a lot of people have been put on this government furlough scheme in the UK where they're essentially being paid to stay at home. So there's a little bit of disposable income there to use. But it looks like from a race entry point of view at club level, things are pretty ebullient. So I don't think anyone can sit and think it's all going to be rosy forever. There's obviously a lot of pain in the employment sector. So, this is a discretionary pastime, motorsport, almost at all levels, right, apart from the elite tier. So we've got to be very cautious. But no, it is encouraging.
And have you had any casualties through sponsors because of this, or has everybody been able to hang on?
No, I mean, we know some pain within the teams. I mean, obviously, people are being chipped on what the original deal was. I mean, on the face of it, we were going to be a 12 event weekend championship. We're down to 6, but it's not quite just an easy 50% because obviously we're running 3 races each weekend. So if you look at it on the number of broadcast races, we've managed to maintain 18 out of 27. So that makes the pendulum swing a bit in the other direction. So, there's obviously across the board a decrease in some of the sponsorship revenues. We are aware a couple have decided to, park it for the year, and there's had to be some sort of emergency restructuring going on. But on the flip side, we've got some team announcements brewing where people have been able to land some new sponsors who were looking for a bit of a good deal to get them going for this year with a view to doing 2021. So it's always a mix of good and bad news, these situations. But the net outcome is, everyone's taken a bit of a hit, but the hit at the moment is manageable.
Now, just getting on to the riders before I let you go. Cal Crutchlow obviously been in MotoGP for a few years. Plenty of rumours about where he's going, if he's going to be with the LCR team next year. English riders, UK riders, is there any more coming up that are going to join the ranks? Because we look at the World Superbikes, there's been a heap of British riders in the championship for a number of years. Have you got a number of more stars coming up through the ranks?
Yeah, there's some bubbling. I mean, I think I wouldn't be incorrect to say I think maybe the scene's the same for Australia and as well, and certainly the USA. There's not a chocolate machine that can you push a button and half a dozen MotoGP potential riders come out every year. Obviously, the World Championship is hugely dominated, certainly MotoGP, by Spanish and Italian riders. That's where, certainly up to this point, much of the commerce and team structure has come from, and they kind of tend to look from within. But there is, we've always tried to maintain the position, and I think Peter Goddard and Peter Doyle are doing the same for you guys over there. There is talent in the national championships, and we've all got to get the structures in place. I think I put my hands up and say up until probably 2 or 3 years ago, we didn't have perhaps the most streamlined or accessible championships for the young riders. And remember, I think the whole mindset and culture for certainly Spain and Italy is that you're born and within 24 hours of being on planet Earth, someone's put a motorbike under your backside. that culture doesn't necessarily exist, certainly in the UK. In my generation, I've only just turned 50, but I remember being at school. I've always been in racing all my life, and certainly when I was, say, between the ages of 12 and 16, I never ever thought about race. I was around racetracks all my life, every weekend. My dad was part of the organisation, and as much as I used to daydream about there being some crazy loophole that you could race, you knew you couldn't because it was just never even conceived in that period. So we're only talking the mid-80s, that you couldn't go circuit racing until you were 16. Well, now, if you're not in world championship level by 16, you're considered to have missed the boat. So, that culture has never really embedded itself, certainly in the UK. Obviously, we've now joined the party, and we've got championships like our British Talent Cup and Junior Supersport, where 12 and 13-year-old riders can race. But, that's been with a lot of hurdles to get through, and still in the eyes of some in the UK, it's not seen as particularly palatable that people who are children are racing motorcycles on a promoted race field.
Well, I'm sure you're doing the right thing, mate. I'll let you go. I know you need another cup of tea. It's early in the morning over there, but whatever you're doing, keep doing it, because from this far away, when we watch the BSB, there's something special every weekend that happens. The racing is incredibly intense. The competition is there, and whatever you've done and what you've explained, thanks for doing that, and congratulations, and all the best for the rest of the year, Stuart, and hopefully we'll chat later on during the year sometime.
No, cheers, Braxy, and best regards to all our Australian friends. We know there's a lot of people watching the championship, and it's great to have you out there. And keep sending them over as well, because there's a great pedigree of Australian riders that have graced our championship, and they're always some of the best characters, and we really enjoy having them.
Well, that was a great chat, catching up with Stuart Higgs, the boss of the BSB Championship. Probably a few people around the world could learn something from those championships. They've got the television, they've got the sponsorship, they've got the riders, they've got the crowds. People are coming from all over the place. As we saw Scott Redding back from MotoGP into the British Superbike Championship last year, to use that as a stepping stone into the World Championships again. They're doing something right. We wish him all the best, and hopefully we'll catch up with him again. Now, someone that has done a few things right in his time, Jim Scaysbrook. We had part one last week when he spoke a bit about his, starting in racing, his family, how it all happened for him, a bit of his trials, enduros and the motocross, and also what he did in road racing. Now he continues in that vein this week, and he explains a bit more of the Isle of Man and also his friendship with Mike Harwood. And then he gets into a few other little things that are a bit off track, but certainly, man, one of the best. And congratulations again on Jim getting that honour bestowed upon him. Let's chat with Tim for part two.
After that race, then Mike rode again the following year and then retired. And in 1980, I went over there with my own TZ500 Yamaha, and Mike entered me through his shop that he had in Birmingham at that stage, and sort of mentored me and gave me a tremendous amount of help. And so that was, again, a bit of a fairy tale. And it was just such a terrible tragedy that he lost his life the following year in a totally senseless road accident.
Yeah, and I think that's the irony of life when you see people like that with, Graham Mill's another one that we think of, Nicky Hayden more recently in times, things off the track that have come into it. But I was just going to ask you, when he came out to Amaroo Park in Bathurst, were his eyes bigger than yours than when you went to the Isle of Man and saw that for the first time? Or rode it for the first time?
Well, I don't think Amaroo Park particularly fazed him. He'd ridden in some pretty dodgy places. But I don't think these eyes were bigger than mine when I saw the Isle of Man for the first time. I remember somebody picked me up from the airport, and I said to him, where's the track? He showed me the track, and he said, you're on it. You're kidding, aren't you? I arrived in the Isle of Man, I think, a couple of weeks before the meeting itself. And fortunately, I was able to borrow a little road bike, a 350 Yamaha, from a dealership in Douglas, and I did countless laps, thousands of miles around the circuit to try and memorise it. But it's totally different when you you can memorise series of corners at road speeds, but then you get on a race bike and you're doing 4 times the speed, and the series of corners that you've memorised now just became a limp blur, and you have no, then you can't work out where you are, what the next series is that's coming up, and I found that pretty horrifying the first couple of practice sessions that I did on that bike. It was quite scary, but you do get into a bit of a rhythm and, more laps around the track on the road bike and try to put it together in your mind. I never got to the point where I was doing anything more than what Peter Jones said to me later, fast touring. That's all you can do until you're utterly confident that you know exactly where you're going. The unknown at any race meeting, but over there, mechanical failures, you pay very dearly for them, and I had one of those. I was very lucky to get away with it, and that really makes you think twice about what you want to do. And even the second year I went back there with my Yamaha, I thought, well, this will be nice and reliable, but it wasn't. It had a chronic gearbox problem, and the Isle of Man is not the place to have a gearbox seizure, I can tell you.
No, I was going to say your eyes probably opened a bit wider then with the TZ500 because, as you alluded to, they did have a few mechanical problems and it wasn't the best machine that Yamaha have ever produced by any stretch, that's for sure. And to be around there on a 2-stroke of that calibre, I've been there a couple of times and I just shake my head at that with those the peakiness of those things.
Well, the TZ500 wasn't what you call a great motorcycle in a lot of respects. In hindsight, up at to that point, I've been riding TZ350s like just about everybody else, and I really enjoyed them. When they were set up right, they were reliable, they were fast, and what I should have done was just forget the TZ500. I should have bought a brand new TZ350 in 1980, had it properly set up here and just ridden that. I would have gone better on it, and I wouldn't have been as... like I said, it's just when you've got a dodgy gearbox, which these things you just couldn't commit to racing them.
With 2 strokes, you had your finger over the clutch anyway, let alone having something that you knew the gearbox wasn't going to, if that went, the clutch wasn't going to help you out too much anyway.
No, that's right. And I mean, a lot of people all over the world have been waiting for these 500s to come out. They were supposedly the Kenny Roberts replica, but there wasn't too much replica about it. And by the time I got to, these things were late coming out. They were supposed to be here around Christmas of 79, 80. They didn't come out until several months after that. By that stage, it was getting pretty close to the TT. Didn't have time to set it up properly here. And by the time we got over there, I don't know, a dozen or so of these bikes that had found their way to Europe had either been crashed because of gearbox problems or simply parked because people weren't prepared to ride them. And I thought, gee, this is not... I'm on the wrong bike here. But having spent a fortune to get there, I was pretty much committed to doing it. So,
Well, look, at least you're here to tell the story. Now, we've talked a bit about your riding, and you've got a remarkable life. You're a prolific rider. You brought out how many books have you brought out now? I'd say be about 7 or 8. Plus now you've got a magazine that you're trying to keep alive in these very trying times of where magazines aren't. But some of your tomes you brought out, Australia's Motorcycle Heritage, Bikes and Bathurst, the Castrol 6 Hour, your personal autobiography, racing history of Australia as well. There's a few more that I can add to the list. You are a walking, talking encyclopedia. How much time did those books take up? Are you just researching? You must have been in libraries and reading every sort of magazine you could find to try and get the information you needed to put out such informative tomes.
There's a tremendous amount of research, but I was fortunate in that I had, right from the beginning, been a very serious collector of virtually everything to do with printed motorcycling history and photography. And so I had a pretty good library of this stuff, and that sort of thing attracts more of it. People hear that you're keen on it and give you things like that. So, but I was, by that stage, working back in advertising, sort of, which is where I really started. And in the city, working in the city, and quite often, clear your head a bit, I'd go up to the State Library, and they've got quite good archives of all kinds of obscure motorcycling history and volumes of magazines and things, and so I sort of pour through those. And the idea of the first book, the first main book, the Australia's Motorcycling Heritage, came about because I was working on the World Series cricket account with the company I was with, Mojo, and I was pretty impressed by the fact that they had historians on staff who would feed information endlessly to the commentators on television, all kinds of interesting background stuff. And I just couldn't believe how much they'd collated with this. And I started to think, well, it'd be interesting you couldn't do it to the same extent, but it'd be interesting to do a similar type of thing for motorcycling, which was where that book came from. It really is just a, day by day, month by month compendium from post-war up to that point when it was published, I think, late 90s. And it was very well received, I think, because people thought, wow, this is something for us rather than some other sport. And it encouraged me to go on to other books, like the history of Phillip Island, the history of bikes at Bathurst, and these are just basically research. Even the Bathurst book, I thought I pretty much put everything I could find into that in terms of photographs. But pretty much the time it was published, I started to get letters from people to say, gee, I wish I'd have known this was coming out. I've got 500 photographs, et cetera, and within a year of this thing coming out, I had miles more stuff. And I'm at the present time working towards putting that out again, but this time it would be as an e-book. I'm afraid the paper publishing is a bit difficult these days and in book terms. But I thought if I can put it out with as an e-book, I can then use many more photographs, and it's still a reference source in itself, and goes into the whole mixture as another piece of motorcycling history that's been done.
Well, would you be thinking of doing a part two or an update, a revised version of the motorcycling heritage? Because with that, as you said, it brought you up to about the mid to late 90s. There's been still a lot of stuff happening in Australian racing since then, and also on the world stage, how it's correlated to each other.
If you get into modern era stuff, it's more difficult, mainly because of the copyright issues around photographs and things like that. The sport internationally is controlled very strictly in terms of what you can use, what you can show. The FIM or whoever it is that runs it these days strictly licenses photographers who are given very strict guidelines as to what they can show. It just isn't the same as you just can't sort of pick up a box of photographs and convert it into a book. It just doesn't work like that anymore. So to answer your question, no, there won't be a further volume of that. I'm pretty much, since I started the magazine 2006, Old Bike Australasia, that has occupied a tremendous amount of time. I've got a wall calendar with deadlines marked on it, and you basically bounce from one to another. You finish one, you're already advanced on the next one, and there really just isn't the time to do anything beyond that. But pretty much the same thing. It's still a printed matter which goes into, people collect them, religiously. And I know so many people say they've got everything from issue 1, and we're up to issue 87 now. So it's been quite a lot of work.
Now, I'd take my hat off to you for that one, Jim, because as we know, the publishing game is a lot different to what it used to be. There's magazines are falling by the wayside every day of the week, basically. And you've kept that one going. It's more so a labour of love, I believe it would be. I don't think it'd be a massive money-making venture for you, but to keep your nose to the grindstone like that, hats off to you for it, because it is a good read. There's some great articles in it, I must admit. And I'm not trying to put anything in your pocket either.
Oh, look, it is a labour of love, obviously. I mean, I'm privileged, I think, that I can do something that pays the bills that I do enjoy doing like that. My wife Sue is the advertising manager for it, so we pretty much do it all in-house. And we've got a very good art director in Matt Clancy who is responsible for the visual side of it, and we're continually complimented on the quality of the visual.
I'd say I'm going to bring up the subject of probably your proudest moment. Rennie Scaysbrook, your son, the third generation of racer, rider, and also journalist, have followed in your footsteps completely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Rennie was like a lot of kids, I suppose. At school, he didn't really know what he wanted to do post-school. We probably forced him into making a decision to at least do a mechanics course, which he did. But his heart was never really in that, and he was not in that game for very long before he decided he would put himself through a journalist's course. And even before he'd finished that, he received an offer from Jeff Ware to come on staff to work on Jeff's magazine, Rapid Bikes, and that was. Rennie's never really looked back. You're right, there isn't any money in it, but that's never stopped us. And then when he worked for Australian Motorcycle News for 5 years, which was quite prestigious and hard grind, but it taught him the yards. And he then had a short stint running his own magazine called Freewheeling, which was for a couple of years. And then a situation developed in America when Kel Carruthers' son, who'd been the editor of Cycle News magazine for
donkey's years,
20 or 30 years, decided he was moving on to work with Wayne Rainey on the AMA Superbike series, and it sort of word got out that he was leaving, and somebody would be taking his place. Somebody at that stage, they didn't even have anybody. So Rennie just rang him up and said, "What's the deal?" And he said, "Well, come on over." And he did. So they just packed their bags, he and his wife, and shot over there and started work the next day, and still there. And he has developed into a very good rider. He never had the money really to race properly. Wasn't, by his own admission, wasn't a particularly gifted dirt rider, but he was a very good road racer. And once he got established over there with the road testing for the magazine, he was testing some pretty serious motorcycles and track testing them. So he was getting track experience and also doing the odd race when he could. But it was really the Pikes Peak situation that brought him up the next rung. He heard about this and was quite intrigued by the event. He was quite friendly with the KTM people in America, so they agreed to put a team together for him 4 years ago, only 5 years ago now, to contest the event. He should have won that event, even as a rookie. He qualified fastest, but he made a rookie's error in the event itself, and that is again the sort of place you do not want to make an error. It can punish you severely, and he was very lucky to get away with it.
Yeah, I remember watching that video. It was one of those ones where the puckering moment would last for about 3 weeks afterwards every time you'd think about it.
Yeah, that's right. Well, anyway, he did get away with that. He kicked himself for making the mistake because it cost him the event. But he went back there the following year and got second, and the year after it again, narrowly beaten by very experienced riders. And then last year he won it. Admittedly, it was in tragic circumstances, but he won it, fair and square, and bettered his own time substantially. It stands as the fastest time up the mountain ever by a motorcycle, and at this stage it's probably going to stand forever. Thanks
for joining us on Let's Talk Motorsport, and a massive congratulations. I'm sure all our viewers will be wishing the same thing to you. Well done, and thanks for your services to motorcycle racing. I'm sure there's plenty more years left in you as well.
I hope so, Mark. Thanks very much.
No worries, mate. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, hasn't Jim got a few stories? And I'm sure we could fill up plenty of airtime with more interviews with him and a lot of things that he's done. All the best to Jim, and again, congratulations for him. Now, we get back onto the tracks. We just spoke to Stuart Higgs before. Now we have a chat with Dean Chapman, who's the operations manager at Wakefield Park, as he explains the goings-on of what's going down there on the outskirts of Goulburn in New South Wales. Well, g'day Dean from Wakefield Park. Thanks for joining us on Let's Talk Motorsport. And it's probably the first time you've been smiling for a while, isn't it, now that things are starting to get a little bit back to normal?
Thanks, Martin. Thanks for having me. Correct. It's the first time in a long time that we've been able to put a smile on everyone's face around here. But not only that, it's fantastic to have people back at Wakefield Park Raceway, you know, enjoying the sport, which we love. And the sun out at the moment is just a bit of a blessing on top of it.
You guys have, well, not moving the goalpost, but you've, instead of looking at the top echelon of the sport, motorsport and bike, you're also looking at the lower levels of trying to, well, get more people interested in motor racing, I suppose.
Yeah, that's correct. Wakefield Park are building our future around supporting not only the high levels, but more importantly, the lower levels. We see Wakefield Park, the venue, as the breeding ground of all the talent that will be your superstars that head overseas and become, you know, household names within Australia and around the world. We're building absolutely everything we do here around the satisfaction and the ease for people to enter the sport. If we can make it easier for anybody that's sitting at home there on the couch or in the spectator stand or on the spectator's hill, if we can get them on a bike, in a car, anything motorsport related, we feel Wakefield Park have done its job. So we're really trying to break that down that barrier from the person that doesn't know how to get into motorsport but wants to. We really want to help facilitate that.
Now, you've been around racing a number of years. You race yourself. You've come from an automotive background. Now you're the operations manager at Wakefield. Do you think there's still an interest in motorsport, or is the level of interest dropping off compared to what it used to be?
I think it's harder to keep a person engaged a little bit longer as a spectator. However, if there's multiple attractions at a race weekend, I think once they come along and you can keep people engaged from a spectator view, that they'll have the motorsport bug, which we all have. I still see a great opportunity for motorsport to continue to grow. We face a lot of challenges due to motorsport not obviously being the most cost-effective sport to get into. But if we're smart about what we do and we create opportunities where an entry-level person can enter the sport, I still think there's a chance for growth at all levels. And obviously we can see that in the higher levels of motorsport, supercars at the moment, they're looking at options to lower the cost of the category so they can get more people involved and grow the actual brand. Now, I think from an entry-level point of view, we should be doing that and trying to work that out. And we see that with the OJC Cup. Juniors can come along, ride. That series alone will create superstars for the future, but not only superstars for the future, as not everybody will be able to make it. There's still going to be people there that are going to love motorsport, and they're going to pass their love of motorsport onto someone else. And if we can grab them at a young age, they'll only filter through the system and help our sport out long term.
Now, when you said you give people other things to do at a track, you're going to build an amusement park beside the track or what?
So, look, we've decided that we're going to dedicate 2 weekends to a year to ensuring that spectators are the number one person on site. So the things that we've done is built a great partnership with the super trucks. So back in the old days when they used to go around Oran Park with 22 trucks flying around, 2 years ago they had 4 or 5 rolling around, and I believe there's 12 now with multiple more being built. So that was our first attraction, and we've added upon that. So we've got the Pulsars and the XLs coming with massive grids, but then we've also got lawnmower racing. We're in the process of trying to get approval to be able to put some dirt jumps and maybe a little bit of a motocross track up the back, so we can get bikes involved as well on the same days that we have cars. But we're also looking at other options. We're looking at your RC cars. Your RC cars, they love motorsport. We love motorsport. They can come along. So, your spectator can come along and watch some trucks ride around, some bikes do some jumps, go down to the back area of the pits and be able to see some RC cars going around. So the main aim here is get people loving motorsport in any level that they want to get involved in, and it can only be beneficial for all of us that love motorsport.
Well, is there a chance that you'll build a go-kart track as well? Or can you double up Wakefield Park in part? Well, it's only that small and tight. You could use part of it as a go-kart track with the variations you've got in the configurations of the track.
Absolutely. Go-karts need to be looked at and how we can actually have them here at Wakefield Park. In the past, we've had go-karts here. However, over the times where the tracks evolved and changed, our lifts and drops off most probably don't really cater for the go-karts at the moment. However, we have been in contact with some endurance racing go-kart promoters, and we're looking forward to getting them back in at Wakefield Park. Unfortunately, we weren't able to come to an agreement in 2020, but 2021, I see a good opportunity for us to at least get the ball rolling with go-karts here at Wakefield Park. People are going to be biting at the bit to be able to get to Wakefield Park to enjoy the bikes. We've got a perfect track for it. You can see them from start to finish. And the team here at Wakefield Park and the general riding community, I think, just love having ASBK here. And if we were to just have ASBK with television, look, it'll be fantastic, but it won't do it justice. ASBK is at the heart of Wakefield Park, and hopefully we can pick the right date, and hopefully the regulations definitely come in line with making it successful and enjoyable for everybody. All
right, mate. Well, thanks for joining us, Dean. Hopefully we'll catch up again. And we've got those couple of vouchers we'll give away through our socials as far as some discounted ride and track days for you. But thanks again. Thanks for all the hard work, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, and I look forward to seeing everybody at Wakefield Park shortly.
Great to catch up with Dean Chapman, and as he explained a bit of the passion that goes into the people at Wakefield Park to try and promote motorsport and get it back up and running. Well, we had two promoters, I suppose you'd call it, with Stuart Higgs and Dean Chapman, two riders, one from the old school Jim Scaysbrook and the new school with Tommy Toparis. Thanks for all of them for being a part of it. Thanks for you for listening and watching. And until next time, I'm Mark Brack signing off.